Ma'am, step away from the conveyor. That's my purse. You're not touching it. Sir, take a breath and back up, please. The fluorescent lights buzzed like held-back questions. Evelyn Thomas stood rigid, one hand clamped to a small, worn leather purse against her hip, the other half raised as if to ward off an invisible accusation. Around her, a river of travelers flowed, rolling suitcases, a child's laugh, the metallic clink of a coffee cup. But at the TSA lane, everything narrowed to the sharp sound of a plastic bin sliding, the thin scrape of a badge against fabric, and the low, deliberate voice of Officer John Harper. Air smelled of sanitizer and reheated breakfast. Evelyn's heels clicked twice as she planted them, a metronome of dignity. Her gray coat was buttoned to the throat. A thin gold brooch caught the light and trembled, an old wedding band of steadiness. She was 54. I said in the calm lines time writes on faces that have learned how to wait without giving up. The purse, soft brown, with a long strap and a frayed seam, had been at her side for years. It was small in the way intimate things are small. A passport tucked inside, a wallet, a folded card with a name and title. Empty your pockets and place all metal in the tray, Harper repeated. He wore a standard navy jacket with a name patch. His hand hovered, not quite on the purse, but close enough that the leather seemed to stiffen. Evelyn moved slowly, palms outward. Officer, my identification is here. I'm traveling on official business. The words were calm. The room felt colder for them. A woman behind Evelyn adjusted her scarf and glanced at her watch. A toddler shrieked 3 rows back. Somewhere beyond the plate glass, a plane droned as though clearing its throat. Harper's eyes flicked to the brooch, the purse, then away. We have to be thorough. He said it like a line he had delivered 100 times. He reached toward the purse the way someone reaches for a door handle, practical, necessary. Evelyn's grip tightened. No. You will not reach into my bag, she said. Her voice was even, but the tautness in it made the word not significant. People close by turned. A man with a briefcase took a step forward, then stopped. The conveyor hummed, a soft undercurrent to the rising heartbeat of the checkpoint. Harper's hand froze. For a second, the world held its breath. The badge at his breast whispered as it moved. Ma'am, we can't have you holding on to the personal item during screening. Evelyn's fingers left the strap and smoothed the purse as if smoothing paper. Then you may search it in my presence. I do not consent to unattended handling. Her English, plain, precise, had the measured cadence of someone who had argued for things before. She kept her eyes on Harper, not angry, not pleading, expectant. A woman at the next lane murmured, Isn't she being difficult? Another man muttered, Just let them do their job. The security line became a chorus of small opinions. The brooch at Evelyn's collar flashed as she turned slightly, and sunlight from the high windows struck it, making a tiny, stubborn flare. In that moment, a traveler's phone snapped a photo. A hand fumbled at a record of the scene. The hum of electronics joined the hum of the lights. Harper's voice changed. The edge of authority tightened. If you don't hand it over, ma'am, we will detain you. The word landed in the air like a stone. People glanced at each other. A child stopped crying. The conveyor kept moving, impartial as a river. Evelyn lifted her chin. Then detain me. She did not step back. The purse pressed against her hip as if tethering her to the truth of who she was. Around them, the terminal clock ticked toward departure gates, toward lives that would and would not wait. Someone behind Evelyn whispered, She looks important. No one yet knew to whom. No one yet knew what the leather of that purse held. The brooch at her collar reflected light like a small, private star, unremarked until now. Enjoying this? Tap subscribe for tomorrow's story. Evelyn Thomas moved through the terminal with the deliberate patience of someone who had learned to carry time like a small, precious thing. She navigated the sea of travelers as if walking a garden path, steady steps, polite nods, a practiced ease that suggested long habit rather than hurriedness. At 54, she kept her hair in a neat bun, a coat that knew the shape of her shoulders, and a leather portfolio tucked under her arm like a map to an important place. Her phone displayed the boarding pass in clean black type, DFW, DCA, Flight 214. The screen also showed a single notification, panel confirmation, 10 a.m. Today was November 22nd, 2025. The date glittered with quiet urgency, an appointment that would not be postponed. Evelyn touched the screen, thumb resting for a second as if gathering contained things into the palm of her hand. She had arrived with time to spare. Airports were for her a field of small rituals, a cup of coffee lukewarm enough to encourage movement, a newspaper folded to the crossword page, the soft click of shoes on tile. She preferred the morning light that slanted through the terminal windows, thin, honest, forgiving. It made the world feel like an old photograph, real, and yet kinder for the soft edges. At a corner table, she reviewed notes in a careful hand. The words were compact, each sentence a deliberate choice. Names of colleagues. 2 statistics she would not forget. A single line in the margin. Remember presence over volume. Looked like a reminder to the future as much as to herself. The semi-final of her life had taught her that authority could be carried quietly. Presence could be louder than proclamation. People watched her without noticing, an incidental immunity most women her age received in public spaces. A young couple rehearsed the names of their destination. A man with a gym bag argued with his laptop. A child practiced a new word out loud and then giggled, pleased by the way the world repeated it back. Evelyn read, sipped, breathed. The terminal's hum her handlers' distant announcements, the shiver of escalator rails, became a backdrop to the small, exacting work of being ready. When she stood to join the security line, she folded her notes and smiled at the barista. "Have a good morning," she said, and the barista returned the wish with the quick kindness of one paid to the public. The line moved as lines do, forward, a coordinated slide, and Evelyn kept a polite rhythm, placed shoes in tray, laptop out, hands smooth and visible. Officer Harper had a practiced face, the neutral expression of someone whose days were measured by routine and the quiet temptation to see the world in fractions, what should be done, what must be escalated. He directed the line with small, decisive gestures. He was not unkind, he was careful, like someone trained to look twice at shadows. Evelyn stepped to the belt and laid her portfolio in the bin. Her fingers brushed the badge at Harper's chest as she turned. The sound of it, a small metallic whisper, felt almost like punctuation. It made her think of all the objects that meant something only when up close. Keys, a ring, a note in a pocket. She straightened, reminded herself to breathe, and waited. Someone in a navy jacket said something to Harper, words that the crowd did not catch. Harper's head tilted fractionally, the kind of motion that meant a small change. He signaled for the next tray. The conveyor whirred. A soft alarm in a distant lane clicked and then fell silent. For a moment, the choreography of the checkpoint slowed, like a film briefly taken down a notch. Evelyn moved through the detector with the same steady grace she brought to everything. Her shoes clacked on the floor and then stillness returned. A technician waved her onward. She gathered her things, sweater, binder, the small items one only notices while looking for them, and then reached for the strap of her bag at her side. There was a ripple in the air, not loud but noticeable, a phone camera shifting, a pair of eyebrows raised, a voice lowered to a murmur. Something in the lane ahead had paused the flow. People do not notice pauses until they have to choose where to look. Evelyn looked too. Harper stood there, a line between the conveyor and the open gate beyond. His jaw was set differently now, as if a new fact had been introduced into a tidy ledger. He was speaking to someone, another officer perhaps, or to a supervisor over a radio. He called a name softly, then clipped it at the end. The barista's laugh a few yards away stopped mid-phrase. Flight attendants crossing toward their gate slowed and watched as if absorbing the first lines of a story about to be written. Evelyn felt the room pivot toward that small tilt. People adjust their distance to discomfort like tides. She sensed, with the precise, quiet steadiness of someone accustomed to observation, that her day had taken a turn. Not towards spectacle, she told herself, but towards something procedural that might require her attention. She stepped forward to see, and in doing so, entered the space where personal met public. The terminal's lights settled on her face, plain, composed, a ledger of years of negotiations and patience. She kept walking in that light, toward whatever the checkpoint would demand. Her phone buzzed once in her coat pocket. She did not check it. Sometimes preparedness means waiting, not reacting. Sometimes it means standing in the place where the world will measure you. Evelyn folded her hands and met Harper's gaze. The hum of the terminal pressed close, the same steady sound that had been there since she sat at the table. Outside the window, a jet's contrail carved a brief, white promise across the crisp November sky. Harper's posture shifted, his hand came half-raised. Evelyn kept her expression small and open. In the pause before words, a few onlookers whispered, and a child pointed. A woman 2 people back turned to text on her phone. The moment was ordinary, like a held breath on a winter morning, still and expectant. Evelyn stepped closer to the checkpoint, the soft heel of her shoe making a clean, deliberate tap against the polished tile. The sound barely rose above the terminal hum, yet Harper looked up at her as if the tap itself had called his name. His stance was formal, shoulders squared, radio angled toward his chin, but his eyes carried a flicker of something unsteady, as though he were trying to decide whether to follow instinct or instruction. The second officer, Denise Clark, approached from the adjacent lane. She was younger, with kind eyes behind her regulation glasses and a posture that suggested she used patience as often as authority. She spoke low. "John, is this the passenger?" Harper nodded once. "Bag needs secondary." His tone was dry, clipped, and aimed at professionalism. But the pause before he said it, the subtle half-second drag, made Clark glance at Evelyn as though assessing a more complicated picture. Evelyn offered a calm nod. "Officer Clark, my belongings are here. I'm willing to assist in whatever you need, provided the items stay in my line of sight." Clark acknowledged her with a courteous, "Of course, ma'am," and began putting on gloves. Her movements were careful, respectful, almost gentle. It reminded Evelyn of a nurse checking a pulse. But Harper stepped forward first, blocking Clark's reach. "I'll handle it," he said. Clark hesitated. "You sure?" Harper's jaw tightened. Protocol. That word, protocol, hung between them. Travelers shifted, trying to sense whether they were watching normal inconvenience or something sharper. A man with a baseball cap muttered, "This is going to take forever." Someone behind Evelyn sighed loudly, frustrated not at her, but at the delay. Evelyn kept her breathing slow. She had dealt with scrutiny before. Committee rooms, interviews, the exacting eyes of people trying to read meaning into a single blink. She understood pressure. She understood patience. But she also understood dignity. "Officer Harper," she said softly, "may I ask what prompted the secondary?" He avoided her gaze. "Random selection." Clark glanced subtly at him. "We already cleared random for this lane." "I said secondary," Harper repeated, louder now, posture rigid. The tension in the space tightened like a drawn string. Travelers leaned slightly, bodies instinctively tilting toward sound. A child held her mother's sleeve. A businessman checked his watch in irritation. Evelyn placed both hands lightly on the edge of the metal inspection table. "I respect security procedures." "I always have. But I must see the contents as you inspect them." "I haven't even touched the bag yet," Harper said, defensive. This was true, but he had moved as though he intended to take it out of her sight. And Evelyn had seen such movements before, small shifts that could reshape outcomes. Clark stepped in carefully, lowering her voice. "Why don't we both handle it? Keeps everything clean, transparent." Harper hesitated, the muscles in his jaw moving once, twice. He looked at the purse on the belt, brown leather, soft with age, a frayed seam near one corner. The purse was unremarkable, the sort of item countless travelers carried every day. And yet, in this moment, it seemed to hold more weight than its size could justify. Evelyn folded her arms loosely. "If you insist on the search, then please proceed. I have nothing to hide." Her tone was steady, but there was a history beneath it, years of moving through rooms where she was seen and not seen at once. Years of defending her right to be present. Harper reached for the purse again. Just before his fingers touched the strap, a voice from 3 bodies back spoke up. Why is she being singled out? The woman with the scarf. She didn't sound angry, just curious, openly curious, in the way people become when fairness feels tilted. Harper didn't respond. He picked up the purse and set it on the inspection table. Evelyn stepped forward immediately, ensuring she was only inches away. Clark moved to the opposite side, hands poised but not intrusive. "Ma'am," Clark said gently, "we'll open it now." Slow movements. Evelyn nodded. Harper opened the clasp. The small click of metal felt unnaturally loud. Inside, a neatly folded scarf, a slim wallet, a worn notebook, and a slim leather card case. Harper lifted the wallet, firm but not rough. "Identification." "In the card case," Evelyn said. He opened it, then paused. A beat, then another. The terminal noise seemed to dim around them. Clark leaned in slightly. Her eyes widened. She inhaled, almost imperceptibly. Harper swallowed. He slid one finger under the card to lift it. The lighting overhead caught the subtle reflective seal in its corner. The embossed lettering. The title. He blinked once, as if recalculating his morning from the start. Evelyn watched him without flinching. She knew the moment he understood. Clark looked at Evelyn again, really looked at her now, with a respect she had not yet shown. A traveler nearby whispered, "What is it?" But no one had the answer yet. Only Harper, reading the line on the card. And Evelyn, standing quietly, letting the world arrive at the truth at its own pace. Something shifted in Harper's posture, small, but undeniable. A stiffness draining. A realization forming. "Ma'am," he said slowly, voice thinning. But before he could finish, an alarm chirped somewhere beyond the metal detectors, and the entire line jolted. The moment held, suspended, deepening the gulf between what Harper had assumed and what he had just seen. The alarm from the far end of the checkpoint let out a short, sharp trill, more nuisance than emergency, but it broke the moment like glass under a heel. Officers glanced up. A few travelers startled. But nothing was actually wrong. A metal water bottle had been left in someone's backpack. The commotion faded within seconds. What did not fade was the silence wrapped around Officer Harper. He still held Evelyn's diplomatic identification card between two gloved fingers. The reflective emblem, faint, official, impossible to misunderstand, caught the overhead lights in a precise glint. His throat moved once, trying to find its way back to speech. Clark was the first to breathe. "Ms. Thomas," her tone was softer now, tinged with recognition. "Would you like a private screening room? It might be more comfortable." Evelyn straightened. "I prefer to stay right here. Visibility protects everyone." Clark nodded, accepting the choice without hesitation. But Harper was still stuck between procedure and realization. His face went through small changes, shame, confusion, calculation, before settling into something like stunned responsibility. "I didn't know," he said quietly. Evelyn's answer came without bitterness. "That is the nature of identification, officer. You cannot know until you look." A small murmured ripple moved through the line as people caught fragments of what was happening. The woman in the scarf pressed her hand to her chest. The businessman lowered his phone, suddenly attentive. Even the child holding her mother's sleeve stopped swinging her foot. Harper cleared his throat. "Ma'am," he seemed to try again. "I should call a supervisor." "Then please do," Evelyn replied. Clark stepped closer, as though ready to support both of them. "John, go ahead. I'll stay with her." Harper nodded and reached for his radio. The tiny click of the transmit button echoed faintly in the quiet space around them. "Supervisor to Lane C, immediate review requested." Static. Then a reply. "On my way." Evelyn watched him, not accusingly, not triumphantly, but with a calm that made him uneasy. It was the calm of someone accustomed to stepping into rooms where skepticism waited to be proved wrong. She clasped her hands lightly in front of her. "Officer Harper, for clarity, did I behave in any way that raised concern beyond standard procedure?" He didn't answer immediately. His gaze drifted toward the purse, then to the card case, then back to her. "No, ma'am." Clark repeated it more firmly. "No, ma'am. You've been patient and cooperative." Around them, travelers leaned in subtly. Not nosy, curious in the quiet, moral way people become when fairness is being measured. Even those who had been impatient minutes before now stood a little straighter, as if their conscience had tapped them on the shoulder. Evelyn inhaled, then exhaled in a slow, controlled stream. "Then we will wait for your supervisor together." Harper did not move. It was as if the world had narrowed to a single, unwavering truth. He had misjudged her. Not by overt hostility, his record was probably clean, but by assumption. Assumption wrapped in uniform blue. A middle-aged man, two travelers' backs shifted forward. "Ma'am," he said quietly, "are you all right?" Evelyn turned with a small, courteous smile. "Yes. Thank you for asking." A simple exchange, but it deepened the onlooker's investment. People often need one voice to break the bystander silence. Clark kept her eyes on Harper now, not Evelyn. "John," she murmured, "you followed the process. It just took a turn you didn't expect." This was kindness, but Harper didn't take it. "I should have looked at her ID first," he said. "I should have listened." His voice was barely above a whisper, a confession to the air more than to anyone in particular. Before Clark could answer, a supervisor approached, a tall, composed woman in her late 50s named Sharon Reed. Her presence had a steadiness that came from years of mediating moments just like this. "What's the concern?" Reed asked. Harper handed her the card. Reed read it once, then again. Then she looked up at Evelyn with familiar recognition. "Ms. Thomas." "Good morning." "Good morning, Supervisor Reed. You're expected in D.C., I believe?" "Yes." Reed returned the card with quiet respect. "Thank you for your patience. We'll expedite you through immediately. Officer Harper will finalize clearance." The line around them grew still. No one moved, as though witnessing something important, something that said more about dignity than the scene itself. Harper stepped forward, hands trembling slightly as he returned Evelyn's purse. "Ma'am, I apologize. I didn't mean." Evelyn accepted the purse with graceful economy. Intention matters. So does outcome. The words were gentle, yet they landed in Harper's chest with unmistakable weight. Reed turned to him. "John, walk Ms. Thomas through. I'll take over your lane." Harper nodded stiffly. "Yes, ma'am." And so, in a subtle reversal, the officer who had attempted to seize the purse now found himself escorting the woman who carried it, quietly, respectfully, one step behind her rather than ahead. As they moved past the checkpoint, a few travelers shifted to make room. The woman in the scarf offered a supportive nod. The businessman lowered his phone completely, looking embarrassed for having recorded part of the incident. Even the child waved. Evelyn returned each gesture with a soft, composed glance. But when she stepped fully into the concourse, purse resting again at her side, she noticed something else. Harper was still following her. Not out of duty, out of something heavier. Something beginning to resemble remorse. Evelyn paused just beyond the security perimeter, where the concourse opened into a wide hall of glass, light, and motion. The echo of rolling luggage mingled with the distant hiss of espresso machines. Morning travelers swept by in purposeful currents. Harper kept a measured distance behind her for maybe 5 paces, close enough to show he hadn't fully stepped out of the moment, far enough to avoid seeming intrusive. His posture had changed. Shoulders lowered, steps slower. It was the careful gait of someone trying to understand the shape of their own mistake. Supervisor Reed rejoined him briefly, giving a few concise instructions before returning to the lane. Whatever she said, Harper carried it heavily. He approached Evelyn only when she turned and invited the moment by lifting her chin in quiet acknowledgement. "Miss Thomas," he said, voice steady but subdued, "I'm supposed to verify you reach your gate without issue." Evelyn considered him for a long breath. Is that protocol or contrition? He blinked, surprised by her frankness, but did not retreat. "Both, ma'am." Travelers flowed around them like a stream around 2 standing stones. A pilot rolled past, glancing at the pair. An older couple whispered gently to each other. A service cart beeped twice as it navigated the turning space. Evelyn stepped aside to let the cart pass. "Officer Harper," she said, "may I ask what made you select my bag?" The bluntness wasn't harsh. It was surgical, precise, necessary. Harper opened his mouth, then closed it. Honesty pressed at him, and he let it through. "A note flagged you in our system," he said. "Minor detail, nothing serious. But it made me look harder than I needed to." "A note," she repeated. "Yes, ma'am. About me." He shifted his weight. "About a passenger with a similar travel pattern. That's all I knew. But when I saw you holding the bag close, assumed." "Assumed what?" He swallowed. "That you were hiding something." Evelyn absorbed this without visible reaction. "And did you consider any alternative explanations?" "I should have," he replied quickly. "I didn't." Clark approached them briefly, handed Harper a small slip confirming the completion of the secondary report, and gave Evelyn a respectful nod. "Safe travels, ma'am." Then she disappeared back toward the checkpoint, leaving Harper to his reckoning. Evelyn tucked the slip inside her purse. "Officer Harper, your job carries weight. You know this. But weight does not excuse imbalance." He nodded, chastened. "I understand." A soft announcement chimed overhead. "Flight 214 to Washington, D.C., now boarding Group A." "That's my flight," Evelyn said. "I know." Harper gestured toward Gate 17, a quiet walkway just ahead. "I'll walk you." They moved together, side by side now. though he kept half a step behind her out of deference. Travelers parted naturally around them, sensing the tension had softened but not disappeared. As they approached the gate area, Harper spoke again, more quietly. "Ma'am, earlier when you said visibility protects everyone, I didn't understand what you meant." "You do now," Evelyn said. He nodded. "Yes, ma'am, I do." They stopped short of the jet bridge entrance. The gate agent scanned boarding passes with cheerful efficiency. A beam of winter light cut across the waiting area, illuminating dust motes drifting like tiny, slow-moving stars. Harper took a breath. "Is there anything else I can do to make this right?" "There is something," Evelyn said, her voice a gentle directive. "Learn to recognize when procedural caution crosses into personal bias, and correct it before it becomes harm." He nodded slowly, absorbing each word like a weight placed deliberately in his hands. "And remember," she added, "respect is not reserved for rank. It is owed to every traveler who walks through your lane, with or without a title on paper." Harper's voice thinned. "You're right, ma'am." But Evelyn raised a hand, not in dismissal, but in thoughtful restraint. "Officer Harper, not ma'am. Use my name." He straightened. "Yes, Ms. Thomas." A small, important shift. A boarding call echoed again. Evelyn adjusted her coat, lifted her purse, careful, familiar motion, and offered a final, dignified nod. "I trust," she said, "that the next passenger who needs patience will receive it." "You have my word," Harper replied. But just as Evelyn turned toward the gate, a group of travelers who had witnessed the earlier confrontation stepped forward, subtle, hesitant, uncertain if they should speak. The woman in the scarf was among them. "Miss Thomas," she said gently, "we just wanted you to know we saw how you handled everything." With grace. Evelyn gave a soft smile. "Thank you." Grace is a form of strength. The businessman stepped forward next, rubbing the back of his neck. "I deleted the recording. It felt wrong to keep it." "That was the right choice," she said. The child raised her hand in a tiny wave. Evelyn waved back. For a moment, the concourse became something gentler, a community shaped not by chaos but by clarity. Then Evelyn stepped into the boarding line, purse steady at her side. Harper watched her go, shoulders squared, expression changed, not defeated, but awakened. No one yet knew that this moment, recorded only in memory, would ripple far beyond Gate 17. And no one, not even Evelyn, knew that the twist was already on its way. Evelyn stepped onto the jet bridge with the steady composure of someone returning to familiar air. The hum of ventilation surrounded her, soft, rhythmic, like a prelude to thought. The space was narrow, bright, and quiet enough that each footstep sounded deliberate. But halfway down the ramp, the gate agent jogged after her. "Ms. Thomas," the young woman called. Her blazer was slightly askew from hurrying. "I'm so sorry. Could you return to the podium for a moment?" Evelyn paused. "Is there a problem?" "Not exactly, ma'am. Sorry, Ms. Thomas. It's just, there's a message for you." "A message?" At this moment. During boarding. That alone was unusual. Evelyn followed the agent back into the gate area. Passengers still streamed forward in orderly lines. Harper remained a short distance away, arms clasped behind him, watching her carefully. He noticed her change in direction and frowned, instinctively stepping closer but not intervening. At the podium, the gate agent opened a small terminal window. "This came through about 2 minutes ago." She printed a slip and handed it over. The message was simple, crisp, official. "Passenger Evelyn M. Thomas, please hold boarding. Diplomatic liaison en route for immediate consultation." Evelyn lifted her eyes slowly. Did it specify the nature of the consultation? "No, Ms. Thomas," the agent corrected gently. "Just urgency." Harper approached, concern etched across his features. "Is everything all right?" "I'm not yet sure," Evelyn said. A tall man in a gray suit entered the gate area at a brisk pace. He carried no bag, only a slim phone and a badge clipped discreetly inside his lapel. His presence radiated quiet authority without theatrics. The gate agent straightened. "Sir." He offered a small nod. "Thank you. I'll take it from here." He turned to Evelyn with a composed expression. "Ms. Thomas, I'm David Carson, State Department Field Liaison." "Mr. Carson." Evelyn shook his hand, noting the firm but respectful grip. "I wasn't aware a liaison was being dispatched." It was a last-minute request, Carson replied, triggered by a field alert. Related to what? Evelyn asked, voice level. Carson's gaze swept the terminal, then returned to her. Your security screening. Harper stiffened. Evelyn remained still. What about it? Carson lowered his voice. Your identification card was scanned at the checkpoint. When it flagged your assignment, it auto-notified our office. That normally wouldn't require intervention unless there were irregularities. Are you suggesting my credentials are in question? Evelyn asked carefully. No, Carson said quickly. Not yours. He glanced at Harper. A charged pause followed. Then Carson continued. Ms. Thomas, the system logged a procedural anomaly. It appears that during your screening, an officer initiated a Level 2 bag seizure without mandatory escalation, despite your diplomatic status and despite a valid exemption marker. Harper's eyes widened. I didn't know about the exemption. Carson held up a hand. This isn't accusatory. Not yet. But the system also cross-referenced the officer's ID. Earlier today, a pattern review flagged an unusual number of provisional detentions in his lane this month. Harper inhaled sharply. Sir, with respect, those were random screenings. Mostly. Carson echoed. Clark, who had quietly stepped forward from behind the podium, looked between them with growing concern. Evelyn's posture remained steady, though a subtle tension drew across her shoulders. Mr. Carson, what does this mean for my travel? That's the twist, he said plainly. You aren't here to be questioned. You're here to be escorted. Escorted? Harper repeated, baffled. Carson nodded once. Your appointment in Washington has been elevated. A new briefing was added to your schedule an hour ago, one requiring secure transit. We're placing you on a government shuttle flight instead. Evelyn blinked. I wasn't notified. You are now. Carson offered a thin, almost apologetic smile. And the shuttle departs from a restricted terminal. I'm to take you there directly. A small group of onlookers, those who had seen the earlier confrontation, watched with widening eyes. Their understanding of the morning shifted again, the way a camera lens refocuses on a deeper layer of the scene. Harper took a step forward before he seemed to realize what he was doing. Ms. Thomas, I apologize again. I didn't know who you were. Carson's voice carried a quiet firmness. Officer Harper, that's precisely the issue. Diplomats are to be treated like any other traveler until credentials are presented. But once presented, protocol is clear. Clark's face tightened. She looked at Harper with empathy and alarm. Evelyn sensed the moment tipping, gently but distinctly. She drew in a breath. Mr. Carson, she said, before we leave, may I address something? Of course. She turned to Harper. Her tone was soft, deliberate. Officer Harper, this situation is larger than you, but the lesson remains yours. Authority must meet humility, or it becomes imbalance. Harper nodded, absorbing the weight of it. Carson motioned toward a side corridor. Ms. Thomas? The shuttle is waiting. Evelyn lifted her purse, the signature object returning to her side with familiar significance. The light caught the worn leather, just as it had at the checkpoint. She followed Carson toward the restricted access door. But just before she stepped through, Carson added something in a low, meaningful tone. And Ms. Thomas, the reason they're rushing you to D.C., it concerns today's incident. More than you realize. Evelyn paused mid-step. So did everyone else. The twist was no longer emerging. It had arrived. Evelyn stopped just inside the threshold of the restricted corridor. The door behind her hissed shut, quiet but final, separating the concourse from a quieter, controlled space. The lighting here was softer, no bright glare from terminal windows, only the steady glow of recessed fixtures. It felt like walking into a conversation already in progress. Carson slowed his stride when he realized she was no longer beside him. He turned, hands clasped loosely in front of him, the picture of practiced diplomacy. Ms. Thomas, he said, I apologize for the urgency. But your presence in D.C. has become critical. Evelyn regarded him evenly. You implied this concerns the incident in the checkpoint. Carson nodded. It does. Directly. Explain. He took a measured breath, then spoke with the clarity of someone who did not waste syllables. Your appointment today was initially a panel consultation. But after your ID was scanned at DFW, And after the system logged Officer Harper's attempted seizure, the department made a determination. Your first-hand account is now essential for an internal review. Internal review of what, exactly? Evelyn asked. Carson met her eyes. A systemic pattern. She held still. He continued. The Oversight Division has been tracking inconsistencies in checkpoint interactions nationwide. Many small, isolated, easy to overlook. But this morning, when your scan hit the network and flagged the secondary search, the algorithm cross-referenced several open inquiries. He gave a small pause. Your name elevated the issue. My name, she repeated calmly. Your position, Carson clarified. Your testimony carries weight. Enough to move a discussion out of the margins and into formal evaluation. That gave Evelyn pause, not from surprise, but from the subtle shift in the air around the words. She felt it like a draft under a closed door, the change coming, steady and inevitable. And why, she asked quietly, was I not briefed on this role? Carson offered a diplomatic half-smile. Because you weren't supposed to be involved. Not originally. Oversight boards move slowly. But the morning's event accelerated matters. Evelyn glanced back toward the sealed door behind them, imagining Harper still standing near Gate 17, wrestling with the weight of his morning. A moment that had felt procedural now had national echoes. Carson gestured toward a nearby security officer who approached with a calm, professional demeanor. This is Officer Lang. She'll escort us to the shuttle. Lang nodded. Ma'am. Evelyn acknowledged her with the same dignity she gave everyone. But before moving forward, she asked Carson, was the algorithm targeting Officer Harper? No, Carson said, shaking his head. It's important you understand this. The system didn't flag him because of bias. It flagged the pattern. He happened to be one officer among several in the review. Yet my experience became the tipping point, she said. It became the clarifying point, Carson replied. Your credentials added a layer of verification the system rarely gets. A diplomatic designation comes with auditing channels that cannot be dismissed or minimized. Today, the system needed that kind of clarity. He hesitated. And it got it. Evelyn considered this with composed gravity. I'm not seeking punishment for that officer. Carson nodded. The review isn't punitive. It's corrective. They want you to speak to policy, not personnel. A soft rumble tremored through the floor, the muffled vibration of a shuttle idling somewhere below. Lang stepped aside to open a door to a private elevator, keying a code that made the panel glow green. Before they entered, Carson offered an additional piece of context, his tone dipping into something almost confidential. Ms. Thomas, the committee you're flying to meet isn't just reviewing one incident. They're preparing recommendations that could shape national screening standards for the next decade. Evelyn's eyebrows lifted slightly. Not shock. Recognition. You want me to help draft them, she said. Yes, Carson said simply. The elevator doors opened. Lang stepped inside first. Evelyn took one last glance at her purse, the small worn object now appearing almost symbolic in her hand. Once seized, now central. It struck her how strangely life arranged such moments, the ordinary thing becoming the pivot. She stepped into the elevator. As the doors slid shut, Carson added one more detail, a quiet revelation that landed with the precision of an arrow. The committee chair said something when they received the alert about you, he said. She told us, if Ms. Thomas witnessed the flaw herself, then we finally have the right voice in the room. Evelyn exhaled slowly. The small, enclosed space felt suddenly larger. Carson looked at her with measured respect. This morning didn't diminish you, Ms. Thomas. It positioned you. The elevator hummed downward, steady, purposeful, toward a shuttle waiting solely for her. The shuttle touched down at Reagan National just after midday, its descent smooth and unhurried. From her window seat, Evelyn watched the Potomac glide beneath the wing, a long ribbon of brushed silver catching the weak November sun. As the aircraft rolled toward a quiet government hangar, she touched the side of her purse with a steady hand. The worn leather felt like an anchor to her morning, to the moment everything shifted. Carson waited for her at the bottom of the ramp. He gestured toward a black sedan already idling nearby. The committee arranged a direct transfer. They're expecting you. The drive into Washington moved quickly, past orderly rows of bare-limbed trees and marble-gray skies. Evelyn watched the city rise around them. Clean lines, firm angles, a place built for decisions. Carson briefed her in a controlled tone, outlining the structure of the meeting. Review panel, internal observers, a transcript for federal records. They want clarity, he said. Your words will guide how they view the incident and how they view the system itself. Evelyn nodded slowly. Clarity is not difficult to provide. Carson hesitated. No, but candor can be. The sedan stopped at a secured side entrance of a federal office building. Once inside, a staff member guided them through a long, quiet hallway to a conference room with tall, frosted windows and a long oak table. A clock ticked on the far wall, steady, impartial. 5 people rose when Evelyn entered. The committee chair, a composed woman named Margaret Hall, extended her hand first. Ms. Thomas, thank you for coming so quickly. Thank you for inviting me, Evelyn replied. After introductions, the group settled. A transcript device blinked silently on the table. A pitcher of water stood untouched. Hall folded her hands. We've reviewed the preliminary report from DFW. We like your account of what transpired. Evelyn gave it plainly, no embellishment, no omissions. She described her interaction with Harper, Clark's intervention, the moment her identification was revealed, and the supervisory follow-up. She offered each detail the same way she had walked through the terminal, measured, steady, unthreatening, but unmistakably clear. When she finished, Hall asked, "Did you feel targeted?" Evelyn took a breath, weighing the question, then answered with careful honesty. I felt prematurely judged. A panelist scribbled a note. Another leaned forward slightly. Premature judgment, Hall repeated. Explain what that means in your experience. It means being assessed before being understood, Evelyn said. It means an assumption filling the space where patience should be. Officer Harper wasn't malicious. He was rushed. And rushing can become harmful, especially when the person in front of you carries no immediate threat. The room absorbed her words with quiet intensity. Hall asked, "Do you wish for disciplinary action?" "No," Evelyn replied. "Discipline may correct a person. I am concerned with correcting a system." A subtle shift moved through the table, an unspoken acknowledgement that she had struck the center of the issue. Carson looked down, almost relieved. Hall exchanged a glance with another panelist. "We've been examining screening procedures for months, Ms. Thomas. Your case gives us something we rarely receive, a full traceable example of overreach paired with a credible diplomatic witness. That's why you're here," another panelist said. "Your testimony anchors the discussion." Evelyn nodded once. "Then allow me to anchor it properly. Officers should be guided as much by measured discretion as by protocol. Systems must detect patterns, yes, but they must also protect travelers from the consequences of unconscious judgment. And how would you propose we achieve that?" Hall asked. Evelyn folded her hands. Transparency training. Rotational oversight. A 3-step verification before escalation. And a simple formal requirement that any passenger, diplomat or not, should retain visual contact with their personal items during secondary searches unless a credible threat is identified. A quiet murmur of agreement circled the table. Carson leaned back slightly, impressed. Hall gave a small, conclusive nod. "Ms. Thomas, we will incorporate your recommendations into the draft policy. You've given us clarity and balance. That is what we needed." Evelyn inclined her head. "Thank you." As the meeting adjourned, a staff member escorted her to a smaller waiting area. For the first time since dawn, she sat down and exhaled without urgency. The hum in the walls, the building's climate system, reminded her faintly of the airport's steady noise. A motif returning, quiet but familiar. A soft knock sounded. Carson stepped inside. "They were grateful for your presence," he said. "And they're moving quickly. Your testimony may reshape how every traveler in this country is screened." Evelyn gave a faint, thoughtful smile. "Then the morning was not wasted." "No," Carson said. "Not wasted at all." But before he could add more, his phone vibrated with a brief alert. He glanced at the screen, eyebrows lifting. "What is it?" Evelyn asked. "It's Officer Harper," Carson said. "He's requested formal participation in the oversight review." Voluntarily, Evelyn looked toward the window, letting the weight of that settle. A quiet ripple across the surface of the morning's events, unexpected, significant. People were changing already. "Then make note of his willingness," she said gently. "It matters." Carson nodded and slipped the phone into his pocket. Outside, the city moved with its usual rhythm, unaware that a small worn purse had just helped turn a national conversation. The afternoon light slanted across Washington, softening the city into shades of silver and warm stone. By the time Evelyn stepped out of the federal building, the day had shifted into a calmer rhythm. She drew her coat closed, the November air cool but not unkind, and let herself breathe deeply for the first time since dawn. Carson walked beside her. "You handled the panel with remarkable clarity," he said. "They'll finalize recommendations within weeks. Faster than I've ever seen." Evelyn offered a measured smile. Processes move when people decide they must. A black sedan waited to return her to the shuttle terminal, but before climbing in, she paused. "Mr. Carson, a moment, please." He nodded, stepping aside with the patience of someone who knew she was not finished shaping the day. Evelyn's purse, the humble worn leather that had become a hinge in her mourning, rested lightly on her arm. She touched it with a small, reflective motion. "A minor question," she said. "Has the committee contacted DFW yet?" "They will," Carson replied. "Likely today. Supervisor Reed will hear from them first." "And Officer Harper?" Carson exhaled. "He will be interviewed, but not disciplined. In fact, his voluntary statement may help the board more than he realizes." Evelyn nodded, satisfied. No system improves by shaming the people within it. Carson's expression softened, respect deepening. "You know," he said, "many people in your position would have demanded something harsher." "I'm not many people," she replied gently. They entered the car, and the sedan began its quiet glide through the city. As buildings passed in a smooth tableau, offices, memorials, rows of trees, Evelyn rested her hands atop her purse. She felt the weight of what the morning had become. Not dramatic, not loud, but consequential. She thought of Harper's face when the truth of her identity dawned on him. His regret had not been defensive, it had been human. And that mattered. She would remember that. When the sedan stopped at the private shuttle terminal, a lone staff member guided her inside. The waiting area was quiet, its seats arranged in a half-circle around tall windows overlooking the runway. Only one other traveler sat there, a courier with a sealed bag, who nodded politely and returned to his tablet. Evelyn sat with her purse in her lap. The window beside her reflected her face, composed, touched by the day's gravity. The reflection also showed the small frayed seam in the purse's leather. She smoothed a thumb across it, a symbol, a witness, a reminder that even modest things can be pulled into moments far greater than their size. A soft chime rang overhead. Shuttle 9 to Dallas, Fort Worth, now boarding. Evelyn stood, but before approaching the gate, she asked the attendant, "May I send a brief message before departure?" "Of course, Ms. Thomas." She typed a short note into the secured console. "Supervisor Reed, thank you for your professionalism today. Please extend my regard to Officers Clark and Harper. I trust the coming review will help every checkpoint, not just one. E.T." She sent it. The machine blinked green. As she stepped toward the boarding door, she felt lighter, not because the day had been easy, but because it had been meaningful. The shuttle flight back to Dallas was peaceful. No turbulence. No noise beyond the soft murmur of air moving over the fuselage. Evelyn wrote a few notes in her small notebook, each line steady and understated. Policy must protect without presumption. Humility is a form of vigilance. People learn when dignity is offered, not withheld. She closed the notebook and rested her hands. Hours later, when she stepped once again into DFW's evening concourse, fluorescent lights flickered awake around her. Travelers moved in a gentle tide, sleepy children, tired parents, people seeking coffee or luggage or the nearest exit. A typical airport evening. But near the security checkpoint, she saw something unexpected. Officer Harper. He stood a few feet from the lane, not working, off duty, judging by his civilian jacket, but present, waiting. When he spotted her, he straightened instinctively. "Miss Thomas," he said quietly. Evelyn approached, giving him the courtesy of a full attention. "Good evening, Officer Harper." He paused, gathering his thoughts. "I wanted to say again, I'm sorry. For the assumption. For the escalation. For all of it." "You already apologized," she reminded him gently. "Yes, ma'am. But after today's review notice came through, I realized apology isn't enough. I wanted you to know. I'm learning from this. Truly. Evelyn considered him. And what have you learned? Harper wet his lips, searching for honest words. That caution isn't an excuse for suspicion. And that professionalism means looking twice at myself before I look twice at someone else. A faint warmth touched her expression, approval, quiet and sincere. Then the day was not wasted for you either, she said. He nodded. I also heard you spoke on my behalf. I spoke on the system's behalf, she corrected, though her tone carried kindness. And for the dignity of all who passed through it, including you. Harper lowered his eyes briefly. When he looked up again, there was something steadier in them. I won't forget that, he said. Evelyn lifted her purse slightly, the strap brushing her shoulder with a familiar softness. Take care of your lane, Officer Harper. It is a small space, but small spaces shape large experiences. I will, he promised. They shared a respectful nod, and Evelyn turned toward the exit. Her footsteps echoed softly in the long corridor. The hum of the terminal, the day's recurring motif, wrapped around her in its steady, unbroken rhythm. Outside, night had settled over Dallas. The air was cool and full of quiet promise. Evelyn stepped into it with calm certainty. The morning had revealed a flaw. The afternoon had begun to repair it. And the evening, gentle and wide, gave her back the peace she had momentarily lost, along with something more valuable. A sense that even in ordinary spaces, change could begin with a single, simple insistence on dignity. 3 months later, Dallas eased into early spring. The airport, always a world in motion, felt gentler in the late afternoon light. Travelers shed winter coats. Sunlight poured through tall windows. The hum of rolling luggage blended with soft overhead announcements. Evelyn Thomas stepped into Terminal C with a quiet purpose. She wasn't traveling today. She had come for a meeting, one scheduled weeks earlier, after the new screening standards were approved. Her recommendations, once notes in a small notebook, had become policy. Training modules rewritten. Oversight rotations added. Visibility protections adopted. And most meaningful of all, a national emphasis on measured discretion. The concourse had changed since November. Not visibly, perhaps, but noticeably. Officers spoke to passengers with more patience. Explanations were clearer. Screens displayed a small, discreet message. If your belongings require screening, you may remain within view unless otherwise instructed for safety. A sentence she had written herself. As she walked, a familiar sound reached her, an officer's badge clicking softly as he adjusted his jacket. A motif, faint but unmistakable. She turned. Officer Harper stood near the checkpoint, this time in uniform, but different in posture. More attentive, more centered, more aware. He spotted her and approached with careful respect. Ms. Thomas, he greeted, offering a genuine smile. It's good to see you. Good afternoon, Officer Harper, she replied. How are you finding the new protocols? His answer came with measured pride. Better. Fair. They make the lane calmer. People understand what we're doing now and why. He paused. And I understand myself a little better, too. She nodded. Growth rarely comes quietly, but it stays quietly. Harper let out a soft, reflective breath. I wanted to tell you. I completed the voluntary review program. The final session was yesterday, and it changed me, he said simply. Evelyn believed him. Not because his voice was earnest, but because his eyes carried the quiet steadiness of a person who had finally learned where their balance was. Clark joined them, smiling warmly. Miss Thomas, it's wonderful to see you. We've adopted your documentation procedures. They're already helping. Evelyn returned the smile. That's good to hear. Supervisor Reed approached last, nodding respectfully. Ms. Thomas, you should know the committee cited your testimony in their final adoption briefing. It's now part of the National Training Archive. Evelyn inclined her head, grateful but not self-centered. I'm glad the system grew. That is all I hoped for. Reed added, we're better for it. There was a quiet pause, a respectful, collective one. Travelers moved past them, unaware that they were walking through a space that had quietly evolved from a single moment of tension months earlier. Then Reed said, I believe you have a meeting? Yes, Evelyn said. With the regional director. I'll show you the way. Reed gestured down the concourse. Before following, Evelyn turned back to Harper. Officer Harper, He straightened. Yes, ma'am, Ms. Thomas. You said something once, she reminded him gently. That professionalism means looking twice at yourself before looking twice at someone else. He smiled. I remember. Keep remembering, she said. I will. She walked with Reed toward a small conference room near the administrative offices. Along the way, Evelyn's purse brushed her side, a soft, familiar touch. She looked down at it for a moment, noticing again the frayed seam, the worn texture, the history folded inside. The purse had appeared 3 times in her story. At the checkpoint, seized in haste. In Washington, held with renewed purpose. Now, resting beside her as a quiet witness to change. A signature object completing its arc. The meeting with the regional director was brief. An expression of thanks, a discussion of ongoing implementation, a conversation about future advisory roles. When she stepped back into the concourse afterward, twilight had softened the terminal into gold and blue. She took a slow walk toward the exit. No urgency. No tension. Just the familiar airport hum, steady, unobtrusive, almost friendly. At the sliding doors, a woman with a suitcase accidentally brushed Evelyn's arm. Oh, sorry, the woman said. Evelyn smiled. It's quite all right. Simple civility, small, but meaningful. Outside, the air held the early scent of spring. She lifted her face toward it, letting the cool breeze settle lightly across her features. Her phone buzzed. A message from Carson. Final vote passed. Full adoption. Thank you again for the clarity you brought to the room. Evelyn typed back. Clarity belongs to all who seek it. Glad to have played my part. She slipped the phone into her purse and closed the clasp with a soft, familiar click. The day was winding down. The world was still imperfect, but better. Because sometimes change begins not with a grand speech or a sweeping motion, but with a single, steady voice saying, respect is owed. Dignity is required. Evelyn stepped into the evening, coat gathered, posture composed, ready for whatever work tomorrow might bring. Andy, thanks for watching.